Okay, so in terms of your second line, so let's think, we've gotten something's gone wrong with our first line. Maybe we have a big cut. Now we've got pathogens that are entering our internal environment. So this is when the second line kicks in. This is your innate immunity. So these are your sort of general leukocytes. Again, this is your sort of one size fits all. So this is a nice little map of your leukocytes. The ones that are blocked out are part of the third line, so your adaptive immunity. So we'll look at those a little bit later. But these are the really important cells for you to be aware of. Be aware, because I feel like sometimes I say it and it might not be captured as well. So this is a good diagram. But you'll often see this thing like a monocyte, and they'll often link it to macrophages. So monocytes are just like an earlier version of macrophages. I think it can be confusing. Sometimes students think it's two different things, but you've got your macrophage, which is a really big like main character in the innate immune system, and then your monocyte is just like the baby version of that, basically. Okay, so this is a really, really important table or just an important thing to be aware of. Flashcards can be good for this, diagrams can be good for this. Whatever it is, just know the main features of these key innate immune cells. So your macrophages, basically we're thinking about them being really good at phagocytosis. We'll discuss phagocytosis in a second, but it's basically just engulfing pathogens. Engulfing pathogens. As in like phagocytosis, like, like exocytosis and endocytosis. Phagocytosis, like they're just like eating the pathogen basically, and they degrade it and chop it up. Your dendritic cells, I should mention as well, they are an antigen presenting cell, so an APC, so that's why they've got MHC class 2. Your dendritic cells are APCs as well, and they're like the best of the best. So your macrophages are very well known for phagocytosis. Your dendritic cells are very well known for antigen presenting. So that's something to be aware of. Neutrophils, these are not antigen presented, so they do not have MHC class 2. They're the most common type of leukocyte that you see sort of in infections. So there's really, really high numbers of neutrophils. And then they ultimately do this like little kamikaze thing. So they undergo apoptosis after phagocytosis. So with macrophages, when they phagocytose something, they eat it up, cool, they move to the next one, eat it up, move to the next one, eat it up, move to the next one. Neutrophils, kind of like when a bee stings someone and then they die. That's sort of the idea with neutrophils. They will engulf a pathogen, and the way they kill it is that they release all of these like really harmful enzymes and toxins or whatever. So it kills the pathogen, but it ends up killing them in the process. So that's kind of a little characteristic about them. Mast cells, really key. You always associate them with histamine, and they're very involved in your sort of allergic and inflammatory responses. Something to be aware of is that they reside in the connective tissue. So they're not kind of floating throughout the bloodstream. They just sort of sit and release the histamine. Natural killer cells also quite important. These work similarly, not the same, but similarly to cytotoxic T cells. So it's important not to get them confused. And they release these two things you have to know, perforins and granzymes, which you can see here. And those basically induce death in certain cells. So they will detect changes in your MHC class 1. So the way that they do this, remember that innate cells are a one size fits all. So what certain pathogens might do, so some viruses and especially some cancerous cells as well, they know that, the police are coming around looking through windows. So what they do is they shut the window. So the MHC class 1, they down-regulate it. So they just don't have an MHC class 1. This is what the natural killer cell will pick up on. So the natural killer cell, again, one size fits all. It's not checking, is this chickenpox? Is this COVID? Is this salmonella? It doesn't care what it is. It just goes around from house to house, and anybody that has their window closed, as in any cell that doesn't have an MHC class 1, they will release these perforins and granzymes, and that will induce apoptosis, so cell death, and that will kill the cell, ultimately. The cytotoxic T cell is a little bit different because it's part of the adaptive, so the specific immune system, so we'll talk about that when we get there. But just remember that natural killer cell, just like all of these cells, they don't care what they're killing, they just know that it's a pathogen. whereas the adaptive system is a little bit different and more specific. Okay, and then lastly, your eosinophils. These are kind of like the random, like nobody really cares about it, but important in your parasitic infections, and they can undergo phagocytosis as well.